everybody. Welcome to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Pekolsky. Today, we're going to dive into testosterone replacement therapy with my guest, Jay Campbell. Jay is not a doctor, but Jay has become a worldwide authority on TRT and how to do it correctly for you. Now, we must say in advance, we do not recommend or condone doing this stuff on your own in a shotgun approach. Go see your doctor, get yourself tested, do it correctly, because it's not a simple myopic approach of doing one thing and taking testosterone. You bump your testosterone levels up, other things happen. You need to learn how to manage those things. And we also talk about the common things that guys are doing that may be doing wrong. So from anti-estrogens to HCG and other peptides that are very common that maybe are being misused. We also talk about the negative implications of visceral fat and how it's probably contributing to a lot of disease, at least in Jay's opinion. Estrogens, what is ideal estrogen? Should it be high? Should it be low? And how do we manage it? We talk about some of the stigmas around TRT and how to optimize testosterone naturally. There's a lot of great info in here. Now, I will say Jay is not a doctor. Jay is just a well-read, well-researched man who travels around teaching people about testosterone replacement therapy. So there's a lot of doctors out there. Just because he's not a doctor doesn't mean he's not an authority, right? So there's a lot of doctors out there who, once they finish med school, they're done, and they don't understand the current research. They're not staying up to date with what's really current in all medicines. They're just, experts at what they're experts at. And Jay just happens to be someone who's made this a passion of his. He's wrote a book on it called The TRT Revolution, which you guys can absolutely check out. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Jay Campbell.
I'm actually okay with alienating people when it comes to that spiritual stuff, because you realize it's just, they're not there yet. Right. And so when I started this business in 2011, my muscle building business, I was really okay with alienating people with muscle building, because I realized that not everyone's there. Eventually, like if they're an intelligent person, they're going to go down that path. And the same thing is I realized with the spiritual thing, right? Is like if they're actually an intelligent person, it's almost inevitable. And I talk about that with my journey, with like this climbing of the proverbial mountain, where I was ascending the mountain of muscle, right? I was like, yeah, I want to get to be the biggest guy in the world, and that was all I wanted to do. And you get there, you're like, oh, wait, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It didn't fulfill me, it didn't make me confident. So I believe that life is the same way. Mm-hmm. Whether you're trying to accumulate money or muscle or material goods or whatever, there's always this natural transcendence of material external things. So then inevitably the journey turns internal for everybody. And obviously it seems like you've realized that as well, right? There's everyone, as a man, I think it's kind of in our genetic code to pursue external things, exactly, to validate our masculinity. I'm a man, I went hunting and I did X, Y, and Z. I found the best wife. Yeah, I found the best wife. I made kids. I've proven myself. Fuck, now what do I do? Right? And then you go, oh, that was all bullshit. Now the journey is within. Becoming a better person.
Now we head to the cave, man.
Right, now I need to become a better person. Now I need to become a better dad. Now I actually need to start treating other people well, rather than, running people over to go catch the bison or the fucking lion or whatever the hell I was chasing, right? So this internal journey, now it's about chasing wisdom. Now it's about chasing leadership and greatness. And that's where I am now in my life, right? It's like, yes, I still love the physical journey, but you realize it's just, maybe the smallest piece of the puzzle, or one of the small pieces of the puzzle. Now the true journey worth pursuing, the only one worth pursuing, right, is this internal journey of spirituality. Man, tell me about your spiritual beliefs and where you are now and how that happened.
So it's a great question. First, it's an honor to be here today.
Thanks for being here, man.
I appreciate being here.
I'm really grateful you came in to hang out, and we've had some great time together.
Yeah, we have, man. And you're an amazing person.
Thanks, man.
And I mean that. I say that from the heart.
Thank you.
So my spiritual journey, 100,000 foot summary is 7 years old. I ran out of the back of Catholic church. My dad chased me out. He's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm not coming back there. It's whatever, right? And then I think from there I progressed like a lot of guys do. And I was raised Catholic, of course. From there, just kind of, through high school, I started reading books on, the ancestry and ancient understanding of mankind and where we came from, and, all these different questions that I was forming at those ages. And I think I kind of went to, in the end of my high school years, atheism. I just started doubting everything. Like, this can't be anything. This is legitimate. Went to college, graduated with an international relations degree, a bunch of different minors, and became much more liberalized, I would say, in my thinking. Now, I wouldn't say progressive as of today from that combination, but just an understanding that, things are not as they seem. And then from there, I think I kind of went into becoming an agnostic or agnosticism, and then it became aliens. And then, in the last 4 or 5 years, as I became much more in tune with who I am as a human being, a lot of props to my wife, Monica, who's, encouraged me and really been my greatest spiritual mentor. I just realized that there's something bigger without trying to define it than you and me, in this existence, in this realm.
That's exactly it, right? And like people are like, hey man, what do you believe in? I'm like, I don't know what I believe in. I know there's something greater, but I have no idea whether it's God or Buddha or energy, source, spirit. I have no idea. But like, who am I to place my opinion on it? What does my opinion matter ultimately, right? All I know is there's something greater, and my kind of guiding light in life is be a good human, be a good person, like exude love, exude joy, be appreciative, and treat other people well, and life will be great. And it doesn't have to have a definition. And I think, I have my theories and opinions about religion, but it is what it is. Like if it means you're going to be a better person, fuck yeah, man. Like, like whether it's Jesus or Allah or Buddha or whomever, like if it means like, hey, be a good human, that's a win for me, I think, for us.
Yeah, 100% agreement. As I was telling you, I got into studying the Essene. And, without getting into a long esoteric discussion, some people who are Christian or Catholic, they think of them as like spiritual hippies or Gnostics or whatever.
What is the Essene?
So the Essene, from my understanding of them, is essentially the easiest way to explain it, I think, is that we're technically like the secret society. And again, there's so many interpretations of Jesus. The Essene called Jesus Yeshua ben Joseph. And again, for the time period that we understand, Jesus was around 2,000 years ago, but they looked at Jesus as the teacher of righteousness. And so I think from an allegorical standpoint or metaphorical standpoint, there's been many teachers of righteousness in, the ages of mankind, depending on your culture, where your perspective arises from. But Jesus, to them, the Essene were essentially, again, they were, as a secret society, they were quote unquote prepping earth for his arrival. And again, depending on your spiritual beliefs and where you come from, but the Essene, their way is literally what they call the way, and the way of, again, the teacher of righteousness, Yeshua or Jesus, whatever your perspective is what you already said: love, service to others, complete unconditional forgiveness, and an acceptance without attachment to survival, to living this amazing experience.
You said to me yesterday, like your exclusive purpose here on earth. And people, what's your purpose? It's to give love and receive love. And that just, if we can make it that simple, then it would be amazing. Unfortunately, it's not that simple.
It's not.
You have to integrate it into life. There's people who aren't here for that reason, right? There may be, however you want to look at it, there may be people who don't have that true intention, whether it be by nature or by nurture. We don't know that everyone is out for that good. So then there comes in all these confounding variables of like, well, who's out for what, and how do I protect myself, and how do I ultimately allow myself to survive and procreate and live, beyond this meat suit, Yeah. So, I mean, not to get too far down that esoteric talk, man. The reason we're here to begin with, we can go back down the spiritual talks, is to go back and give our audience some really great action items around hormone replacement therapy, and so kind of dispelling some myths. And so, before we get into that, I'd love for you to tell people about what you do now, the book you wrote. So you're obviously Jay Campbell. You have a great podcast that's had some of the world's greatest experts when it comes to hormone replacement, understanding hormones, and what men and women are ultimately doing wrong. Men in particular, I think, but women as well, are doing wrong when it comes to hormone replacement. And doctors, and that's the funny thing, right? Is I think my audience is evolved enough and wise enough to realize that doctors are just guys who go to school for 7 years, and women who go to school for 7 years, who aren't necessarily taught everything.
Right.
They're very bright people, they're very capable, but they know what they know, and nobody knows what they don't know. So doctors aren't taught nutrition. Doctors aren't taught hormone replacement necessarily, unless they're like deep into the field of endocrinology. So you've taken it upon yourself now to go out and learn everything there is to know about hormones, hormone replacement, hormone optimization, different mechanisms, different means of application. And I love to get down that path, because I think it's one, valuable, especially for me as a retired bodybuilder who obviously did some things to my body when I was competing that now is probably causing damage, to learn how to optimize it, maybe how to come off, maybe how to stay on forever. What are, those are all things I want to talk about. So if you could tell us a little bit about your podcast, a little bit about your book, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, awesome. First off, I'm a member of your community since 2012.
Thanks, man.
So
Thanks.
It's an honor for me to be here. You're an amazing person. I've spent the last 2 days with you. I just want to say it's just been, we're so spiritually connected.
Thank you, man.
But yeah, and when I say I love you, I really mean that.
Thank you, man.
So
Likewise.
Yeah, it's amazing to spend the time with you. But regarding hormone optimization, most people I think that listen to your podcast know who I am and my story. So I'll just separate it a little bit. I wrote a book in 2015 called the TRT Manual. The definitive TRT Manual became a kind of a smash success within about a year and a half. A lot of people in quote unquote the bodybuilding fitness industry found out about it, and then luck for my reasons, a lot of people in the optimization physician community found out about it. And, in inner circles in the physician community, a lot of people started, reaching out to me. Hey, how can we talk to you? How can I learn more about, how did you know all this? You're not even a licensed medical professional. Fast forward, 2 years or year and a half, I did found my website and of course the podcast TOT Revolution and the podcast. And I have been very blessed to, like you, connect with amazing people. And I've brought a lot of those people on. The hormone optimization realm, so to speak, and that niche is evolving, right? And it's evolving in a very, very fast rate and speed now, because in the last 2 years, they've been really, the research has dramatically improved. Obviously, there's marketing now where people do understand that it's okay to use testosterone legally and within the confines of a therapeutic level, right, to improve life, to optimize life.
Right. So provided you're low, out of range, go to your doctor and you're using testosterone, there's value.
Absolutely,
for sure.
Absolutely. But as you know, being from the bodybuilding realm, and obviously I, was never a bodybuilder. I did compete as a physique competitor and stuff, and won a couple shows and stuff, and so I know what it's like to live that lifestyle somewhat. But coming from that industry, there's a lot of people that have like a negative connotation when you hear the word testosterone. Right?
Sure. Oh, for sure.
It's demonized.
It's terrible.
You've got the media.
It's
constantly
killing people, Jay.
Yeah.
I'd love to dispel that, but.
Right. Well, I mean, well, clearly we can. And obviously my book, the TOT Bible it's literally 600 pages. It's over 700 scientific references. Every single bit of available data from the last 10 years, up until when the book was published. And I've even added a couple studies like late last year in November, but it's there. It dispels the idea that testosterone is harmful to vascular networks, that it causes prostate issues, that it may or may not do other things, to cholesterol levels, hepatic function, all these different things. It's all not true. Right. And so, half of my battle, and then obviously also some of the physicians I work with, is constantly having to reinforce the idea that there is no negative connotations with therapeutic dosages of testosterone.
Right. Again, I want to go down every one of those paths, because I think it's hard for us just to tell people, hey, it doesn't do that. Even though you've been hearing that for a really long time, it doesn't do that. Believe me. They're just not going to believe you. Right. They're like, well, but the media says this, and I don't believe you. And like, people are hard headed, right? Like, sure. you can't tell them that the world is round when they believe the Earth is flat. It's just like, hey, no, man, I know it's flat. Like, well, hold on a minute. So let's go down some of the path of some of that research. So, specific, estrogen, therapeutic ranges of testosterone. Does it or does it not increase systemic estrogen?
So it's a great question. And this is probably, in my opinion right now, the most relevant question in the optimization therapeutic testosterone hormone realm. And that is, there's a huge misnomer, misunderstanding, misperception that testosterone, when you're using it therapeutically, should be blocked, meaning you should be blocking your estrogen with an AI or an aromatase inhibitor medication. How that is filtered into the therapeutic, physician prescribing community, I don't know. I have theories. I kind of feel like it came, as an offshoot from the bodybuilding realm.
For sure.
Right. And you're the one guy who can verify that. I'm usually talking to doctors, and we kind of get into the weeds discussing that. But the truth is, in the 80s, and this, in the 70s and 80s, and even into the probably mid 90s, the bodybuilders of that time never blocked their estrogen because there were no estrogen.
There was tamoxifen. I've talked to some of those guys. There was definitely tamoxifen, but it's a different mechanism.
Right, exactly. So that's a selective estrogen receptor modulator, which is a specific, tissue mediator versus the AIs, which are women's breast cancer drugs, which are extremely toxic. There is numerous, like over 300 studies that you can find right now on PubMed and Medline that show that using aromatase inhibitor medications in males or females has nothing positive, right? Like there's some studies, and again, these are the supporters of AIs that will go to these studies that show, again, correlation does not equal causation, but show guys and men in compromised patient population groups got a couple of things positive from blocking their estrogen, but all in all, they're, again, compromised and they have all these other issues. So there's a good friend of mine, Dr. Robert Komenarek, is doing a landmark lecture at AMMG in April, which you and I filmed on this podcast about a month out from when that's happening. And it's about the dangers of blocking estrogen in men. So let me talk a little bit about that. So testosterone, when given in therapeutic dosages, and even when given in superphysiologic dosages, obviously the natural biological process is for testosterone to aromatize into estradiol, right? Which is estrogen, right? So when you're at a superphysiological level and you have, all these other quote unquote issues from high estrogen, bodybuilders will block that to avoid those side effects. Here's the issue though in the therapeutic realm, and again, this applies to bodybuilding too, is that when you block estrogen, okay, meaning you block the aromatization pathway, you cause all kinds of side effects and negative issues with the biological processes necessary for testosterone to aromatize into estrogen, which are the protective effect in the brain, okay, joint integrity, tendon, musculoskeletal issues as far as synovial fluid and all the other processes that are in there. It also creates issues in the synaptic and the dendritic pathways in the brain. So when you block estrogen from the aromatization process of testosterone, you're causing harm to biological systems. Here's the biggest issue, and this is what I really want to get home to your audience for the most part, and everyone in the world, bodybuilders and just again people using therapeutic testosterone, because a lot of guys believe this and it's completely illegitimate and incorrect. Using a therapeutic / microdose of an AI to mediate or placate symptomology that you get, that they perceive they get from high estrogen, is still bad, because blocking estrogen in any way, again, causes harm to biological systems. So over time, if you're using like a microdose, which is a lot of guys in therapeutic testosterone are using, like 0.025 of an AI or whatever it is, Aromatase, Arimidex, whatever it is, it still causes all of these issues to the aromatization pathway. So you can never, ever block estrogen in a man undergoing therapeutic testosterone because of those potential issues. And so many guys come at me and email me, and of course the physicians that I work with, and they say, but doc, if I don't, I have X and Y and Z. And the real issue is it's twofold, Ben. The issue that most men have or perceive to have with high estrogen, again, it's high estrogen as a perception from using therapeutic testosterone, is really insulin resistance and visceral fat deposition. Those two things lead to the inflammatory mediators that we know about. Essentially when you're inflamed from those two things, it causes the quote unquote high estrogen symptoms or side effects, which is, mood alteration, instability, water retention, being, off balance, or, just the stuff that guys report is normally from their insulin sensitivity and too much visceral body fat.
Yeah, because when they eat testosterone, they think they can eat whatever they want. So
exactly.
They get
and guys, as you know, whole body fat, like mid-center mass, right? The abdominal adiposity. So it's usually the inflammatory response from the insulin resistance.
Hey, everybody. Just want to interrupt this podcast for a minute to tell you about a supplement that I've been taking that you think you're going to absolutely love. It's something that I always have in my medicine cabinet. I take it with me everywhere I travel, or anytime my immune system tends to get a little run down, I reach for my Ganoderma. And if you haven't heard of Ganoderma, otherwise known as Reishi, I highly suggest that everyone picks this up. So I'm looking at examine.com right now, which is the website that belongs to a very good friend of mine. And it talks about all of the anti-cancer benefits of reishi mushrooms, of Ganoderma. But I don't want to go down the path of talking about it being anti-cancer. So what I will tell you about is everything else you'll see here about its incredible immune-boosting properties. So if you're someone who's fighting with any weakened immunity, or if you're lacking sleep, this should be at the top of your go-to list. So if you're someone who is a little anxious and you have a hard time sleeping, 3 grams of Ganoderma before bed will calm you down, will make you feel amazing. Here's how I use it. And right before bed, I'll have a collagen shake, which is 15 to 20 grams of collagen protein. I'll add in some chocolate greens powder just for flavor, and I'll add in 3 grams of reishi mushroom. I'll also sometimes add in some additional glycine for blood sugar control and detoxification. And I love it. My kids love it. It makes them sleep better. It makes me sleep better. And I wake up in the morning feeling rejuvenated. And honestly, helping with blood sugar regulation, blood sugar control in the morning is a huge advantage in life as well. So I highly suggest you guys check out reishi mushroom. And my best source, as you know, is Four Sigmatic. And Four Sigmatic, because they're amazing and they love you and they love the podcast, is hooking us up 15% off of anything on the website. It's not just your reishi mushroom. It's going to be your lion's mane. It's going to be your chaga, your cordyceps. And if you guys have still not tried any of these mushrooms, dig in. So if you're anyone who loves to do endurance type events, endurance type running or racing or cycling or any mountain climbing or anything like that, cordyceps is a go-to. Chaga is supposed to be something that's massively beneficial for immunity and feeling amazing all the time. It's almost like a adaptogen where it can bring you up if you're feeling down, and it can calm you down if you're feeling up. And reishi, of course, is this one that literally everyone should have. I never leave home without it. So check it out, guys. Head over to foursigmatic.com. That's foursigmatic.com and use the promo code MUSCLE for 15% off everything site-wide. And don't wait. Don't hesitate. Head over there now. And if you guys want to let me know you did that, I would appreciate the shout out on social media and Instagram, just because we want to let Four Sigmatic know we're taking care of them because they take care of us. Have an amazing day. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Okay, so what if we start getting the numbers, right? Because that's where people are looking, or at least the smart ones are looking. Okay, like, hey, so my doc says I have to be under 20. My doc says I have to be between 20 and 40. Or what if I'm showing up at 400? What if I'm showing up at 600 estrogen? When does it become a problem? And if it does, what do I do to combat it?
How do I get everybody to ask questions like you, bro?
Right.
I wish a doctor could ask that kind of a question. And by the way, no prep, right?
Yeah, we're always prepped. It's just,
amazing,
it's just
bro.
my organic curiosity, right?
No, but you just ask the right questions.
Thanks,
but
man.
So it's the best question that anybody's ever really asked me, actually, in talking about this. So here's the thing. LabCorp, who develops the range values for men, utilizing testosterone or therapeutic or whatever, even when they're not, the minimum protective level from the studies and the research shows that a man has to be minimum protection for cardiovascular protection between 60 and 80. And again, not to get into esoteric, but it's like PGs per nanomoliter. But the bottom line is that when you look at the therapeutic ranges and you look at the lab values, again, from LabCorp, it shows men as out of the range over 45. So between like 30, I think it's 20 and 45 or 25 and 45, and somebody can fact check me or whatever. I'm not looking at LabCorp levels right now, but that's where they try, meaning the doctors, to keep you in that range. And so that's the problem, is that the physician community is trying to keep men within the levels based on the confounding variables that LabCorp gives us in the blood work, and it's not even exerting a minimum protective effect. So the issue has become, you ask the question like, when is it too high? When is it too low? The best doctors today who do this right from the beginning are not even checking a person's estrogen levels, because it creates a psychogenic effect in that patient of that he has to be somewhere, in a level below here or above here, because ultimately they know that testosterone must aromatase into estrogen, again, through the aromatization pathway. And at a specific level, there is no issue. So does that mean that you can't have too high estrogen? Of course you can have too high of estrogen. The biggest issue with estrogen, though, is that you get it too low when a person is blocking it with an aromatase inhibitor. And when you block estrogen, again, we already talked about all these horrible side effects, that's when you start seeing really negative side effects. You see sexual dysfunction, you see, again, joint integrity issues. It happens in the brain, right? You're blocking all the dendritic and your...
I'll attest to that one for sure.
Right.
I'll tell some stories about what I used to do with estrogen and give guys a good insight.
Right. So you know that, but to answer that question, because I don't want to like riddle around it, if you are a person that is doing things right, again, in therapeutic testosterone, you're eating right, you're living a clean lifestyle, you're obviously training with weights, you're doing your cardiovascular training. We have some of my doctors have patients with over 200 levels of estrogen, sensitive estradiol pools, and fine. Okay. It's when a guy thinks from his doctor that he needs to be, quote unquote, in a mythical, narrow range or sweet spot, that they start creating these issues. And again, as we already talked about, if you're inflamed, if you're fat, if you're eating like shit, doing all those other things, you're going to have what you presume to be high estrogen symptoms. So the bottom line is if this is done right, and it's rarely done right, Brad, that's a whole nother day of podcast. Right. And we'll talk about that. But the average, testosterone prescribing clinic in North America is what we call windmill clinics, right? It's like testosterone and AI and HCG, right, and whatever else they can value add sell them.
Sure.
Right?
More money per month.
The bottom line, again, this is written about in my book heavily. We really focus on this. Is that when you're not, and again, the misnomer or the offshoot is that if you're trying to become fertile, okay, you only want to use testosterone in isolation, because how is a physician and yourself going to really understand what's doing what in your body, right? You have no way to know. So if you're a guy who's never been on testosterone before, you go and get your blood work, and you're classified as suffering from a deficiency or hypogonadal, and you're started out on 5 different chemicals. How the hell do you know what's working in your body?
Right.
There's no way to know. So then these guys go down these pathways. They've got their estrogen being blocked. They're on HCG, which is another estrogen spike and an androgen spike. Plus they're on testosterone, plus blah, 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 blah. Pregnenolone, whatever. There's no way to know due to all the perturbations in that person's endocrine system for all the various drugs and chemicals. So then they go down what we call this just like, horrible no man's land, vicious cycle. They fire that doctor because that doctor doesn't make them feel good. The next doctor is trying to, quote unquote, fuck them. Mm-hmm. And then it just becomes, again, a vicious cycle. And then it's luck of the draw. Do you ever find a doctor that really knows what they're doing? The best doctors right now in North America, and we're not even talking about the international community where there's very few, are constantly just unfucking patients because of the doctors that have started them down this pathway of all these different chemicals in the body, and they don't know what's doing what. So, there is no range. I would tell you that if you start right with a physician who understands how to do this, they're not going to measure your estrogen. They're going to look at your symptoms and side effects, because the ultimate goal of therapeutic testosterone, again, this is written about in the book, is happiness and balance. And so if you're happy and you feel good, then you get annual blood work, right? Your doctor's checking in with you. How do you feel? As soon as you start having symptoms or side effects, then that's when you're going to really start becoming more precise and looking at maybe individual biomarkers to see if there's a correlation.
What are the typical side effects a man would experience with elevated? We talked about low estrogen, but what would they experience with elevated estrogen?
So side effects of super high estrogen would probably be water retention for sure. It could be nipple sensitivity. That's a whole nother conversation, though, and I'm happy to have that with you right now. And I actually learned this myself 1.5 years ago. But most of the time, nipple sensitivity from testosterone is not actually gynecomastia.
Sure.
It's nostalgia. It's just insensitivity. The body's getting used to, replacing its own natural production with exogenous.
Progesterone.
Exactly. Yeah. Prolactin. Right. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But the bottom line, and a lot of doctors don't know this, and this is a really awesome podcast to break this, but gynecomastia is purely genetic. And I learned that from Anthony. Right. When Dr. Jay and I did our thing, he was like, we checked all my corresponding stuff, and he was like, Jay, there's something not right about you. And he's like, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you have the gyno gene. And I was like, I laughed because I never told him that story, we were talking off the record. And I said, no, Anthony, I had a small little piece of gyno removed in 2016 with one of the world's best surgeons. It's in my book. It's chapter 11 in my book. It's an awesome story. But I learned from him. And by the way, his name's Dr. Joseph Cruz. So if anybody reaches out to me and they need a gyno removed, he's the best guy in the whole world. He's done over 2,900 surgeries. But bottom line is that gynecomastia is genetic, and according to him, between 64 and 68% of all men have gynecomastia. And again, it's genetic. And you will have it, present or show up at any various points of your life. A lot of men have it at puberty, pre-puberty. Some men have it at their late teenage years. And then other men literally just have, an outbreak or, presentation of it in their 50s and 60s. So the issue with testosterone or therapeutic testosterone, if you're one of those people with that gene sensitivity, you're going to have to really modulate your dose. So going back to your question, because I want to answer it even specifically, the best doctors today, when they start you, if they do it right, if you start experiencing what you would consider high estrogen side effects, which again would be water retention, maybe a little bit of a mood imbalance, the number
I don't
one
want
and two,
to
three.
gloss over that. Maybe a little bit of mood and balance is a bit of a
Well,
an
again,
understatement,
therapeutic levels. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, we could do. Well, you can ask me that. We can talk about that. But increased frequency of administration and lessen the dosage. So the average guy who does experience high symptoms or high estrogen, what they would say side effects, is on too high of a testosterone dose.
Yeah, but what if a competitor is like, well, man, that's just what I want to take. So how do we combat that?
So we tell them that. I mean, it's unfortunate. I don't know if there is a way.
I agree because
you want to suppress the side effects, you got to function. Sure,
and bodybuilders are taking too much testosterone to begin with, like unnecessary amounts. And so here, giving my side of the coin. Sure. Just going down the path of the few things that you mentioned there, but drawing them out a little bit. Estrogen levels are elevated. Why? Typically because your body fat's too high.
Absolutely.
So step one, if your estrogen's too high, go on a diet. Yeah. Decrease your body fat.
Absolutely.
Right? Decrease your xenoestrogens. Yep. Right. So decreasing all the things that Anthony J talks about.
Absolutely.
Get the book Estrogeneration, Dr. Anthony J.
Yep.
Go watch his YouTube channel, Chagrin and Tonic. Everything you know about removing estrogen.
Yep.
And start there. That's like step one. Remove that. Remove stress. Stress can be estrogenic, right? Stress can be driving cortisol up and
100%.
causing problems. So anyone has elevated estrogen, start with those things. And then even if you're taking high levels of testosterone, I've seen people with elevated testosterone who just continually get leaner.
Exactly.
So I'm, as you say, looking for negative effects. And if you're not, crying at movies and getting a fat rear end, what are you worried about? And if you are getting a fat rear end, it's usually more of a caloric excess and from the wrong places.
I was actually going to ask you that. So would you say, being from your background in the bodybuilding world, that the leaner the bodybuilder was, the higher the testosterone dose you could have without any potential?
Exactly.
So
but then again, the less you actually need.
Well,
right.
Exactly.
So the leaner you are, your body's also using more.
Exactly. But isn't that funny how fat is what's really causing almost everything?
Yeah.
The inflammatory response of visceral body fat is what leads to all disease.
Yeah. So for all you people out there, it's just laziness, right? It's the human nature of I don't want to go on a diet. I don't want to do cardio. I don't want to be in a caloric deficit. I don't want to be uncomfortable. Just give me the easy pill.
Exactly.
That's the unfortunate reality. So all these people out there fighting against I don't want to take less testosterone, or I want to take an AI because, I think it's going to help me. It's not. Ultimately it's causing, you mentioned yesterday some endothelial issues, like some capillary stuff. So
massively.
Yeah, I don't know that you said that today.
Let's talk about that. So, and I don't have research to back me up, but there are people out there who are laying in the weeds, ready to bring it out there. But they have now seen that using any form of an AI to block estrogen, and again, this isn't any dosage, this is at therapeutic levels versus superphysiological levels, they cause micro blisters in the vascular networks. Now, I don't want to get into the deep weeds on this, but essentially a micro blister is you're a walking heart attack, potentially.
Yeah, so if anybody listening finds the research or hears about it, send it in to us and we'll post it. Yep. We'll talk about it next time. Yeah, totally. And that's interesting, right? So, and I'll give my experience with AIs. I definitely did use them during my career, not knowing any better. And the biggest negative effect I saw, as you said, as my dose went up, which I did, and I'll talk about that, my cognitive abilities were literally nil, right? You can't form a sentence. You're so angry. You're so tired. And that's just cumulative on top of the calorie restriction. And when I didn't do it, I definitively felt better. My energy was better all the time. My sleep was better. And the big thing we didn't talk about yet is cholesterol.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a huge, elephant in the room we got to look at is you take an AI, no matter which one it is, whether it be Aromatase, Arimidex, Letrozole, all of them are doing the same thing to your cholesterol. So they're throwing your HDL in the tank, driving your HDL up, your bad HDL. Which is, again, like you say, you're a walking heart attack. And that's a huge problem. So anyone bodybuilders out there, anyone aspiring to build muscle, start paying attention to that shit and just stay lean, man. And it's not that hard. Here's the thing. I actually had a nutritionist in yesterday. You were sitting there. It was a brilliant statement. Brilliant statement. And I was like, so we his name's Chris Barakat. He was a professor at the University of Tampa.
Amazing.
And he comes in and teaches my coaches, hey guys, here's how to set up the starting points of a diet. So he said, determine protein. First determine total calories or BMR, then total calories, then protein, then fat, then fill in the rest of the carbs. And I said, okay, Chris, we're sitting on this, X number of calories. We've been there for 2 to 4 weeks. We're not building muscle. What do we do with calories? And he said, the best thing. He said, well, nothing. He said, your training's not right. I'm like, Oh, okay. And that's the most important thing that people miss. And this is why I just drive this home with everybody. It's like, you got to learn how to train. And most people say, when you ask people what's wrong with their fitness, what do they say? I know how to train.
Yeah.
No, you don't. No, you really don't. Like, you suck. In a scale of 1 to 10, you're a 3. You rate yourself as a 7 or an 8, but in reality, you're a 3. And if you learn how to train, you need less steroids. You need less food. Absolutely. You grow. So this is why I'm, vehemently an advocate for intelligent training, because we've developed a steroid-based culture, right? And in the fitness community, like, hey man, you want to get bigger, just take more juice. No, idiot. Learn how to train first. Learn the skill of exercise, and then 200 milligrams of testosterone will actually work for you. There's a guy who I know very well who's taking excessive amounts of testosterone. So his testosterone bill ultimately is probably thousands of dollars a month, whatever God knows he's taking from and it's from a TRT clinic.
Sure.
But then he won't spend the money on a personal training session to learn how to, or come to a camp, or he actually has come to a camp. But like, it blows my mind that people are willing to spend so much money repetitively beating their head against the wall on things that are going to speed up this journey and never take the necessary foundational steps to actually learn what they're doing in the gym. It's frustrating. So
I have to shake your hand on that amazing statement. Wow. I learned in the last 2 days of just training with Ben and of course Jordan more than I probably learned in 10 years. And again, I don't focus, obviously it's not my world or whatever, but if it was my world, you would be the guy that I hire. But it's just so true. And I say the same thing time and time again on my podcast, time and time again on my social media. When any younger guy reaches out to me, I say, do you even know how to contract muscle fibers and eliminate ego from your training?
Yeah.
And that's 95% of people training.
Right.
They don't even know how to do it, right?
I made a statement that at least 95% of people don't know how to train, and people think I'm out of my mind. I'm like,
it's
no, that's absolutely true.
Well, I mean, I'm an advanced guy, and I'm not a professional bodybuilder, but you guys made a bunch of corrective adjustments to my training in 24 hours that I'm going to be able to take back, and I'm like, wow, like I've already been texting my wife.
We could put 25 pounds on you in
easily.
3 months.
There's no doubt.
Just by changing your training, no drugs. Just by changing your training.
Literally no drugs. Yeah, that's a truth. And I'm a tall, skinny, non-bodybuilder, non-mesomorph, much more ectomorphic than anything. Yeah. But there's no doubt, and and you don't have to say that. I know that, right? Like just from 24 hours. But to go back, because it's so important what you said, it's the exact same truth, right? Like you have to learn everything there is to know about what it is you're pursuing before you feel that you have a right to shortcuts or hacks or any of that, right? And so it's the same thing. If we're going to talk about therapeutic testosterone, we're going to talk about optimization, which is really what I like to call it. If you're a fat person, and I say this all the time and people get offended, you're not going to get the results that you would get if you were leaner.
As defined as over 18% body fat?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to say it. 15. I think if you don't know, and that's a good point, if you start without an actual accurate gauge, if you're not getting a bod pod or a DEXA, and even a DEXA is a little overestimated because of the water percentage, especially more muscular guys. So a bod pod or somebody like you doing a 9 or 11 site skin fold measurement, if you don't know what your body fat is, why are you guessing?
Mm-hmm. And everyone always goes, well, how much is your body fat? I'm like 12%. Yeah.
18,
or 20. Yeah. So everyone always underestimates and realize, guys, like it matters. And
of course.
So this is, the literal objective of the Muscle Intelligence podcast is putting all these pieces together to allow you to live your greatest life in your greatest body. Like there's more things that go into it than just training, and there's more things that go into it than just taking more testosterone. And that's, why I want to become the advocate, and I'm grateful to have you here, man. So talk to me about the negative implications of testosterone on prostate, because that's always been something that comes up. Like, hey, man, I hear it's going to give you prostate cancer.
Yeah, so it's the total opposite of the truth. All the latest research, again, this is all quantified in my book. It's all there for you. Dr. Abraham Morgan Taylor has been very big in spearheading and collating all of the top research about prostate issues with testosterone. The actual inverse is true. So they know now that men that are suffering from a testosterone deficiency are more likely to have prostate issues as they age, right? Every man, if they live to 80, is going to have some form of prostate cancer, right? That's like a statistical fact. You're not going to die from it, but you'll probably have it because, again, the prostate hypertrophies as we age, again, usually through benign ways, but by the time of 80, most men are going to have some form of prostate cancer.
Interesting.
How many men are going to actually have it measured? Very few. The likelihood of that percentage of people that do have it at 80 are dying from it is minute, right? But, that's, again, the latest research. But in regards to the prostate, this is fascinating. There's a researcher right now in Greece, and he's on my Facebook. His name is Nikos Sakos, and he is actually a neuroendocrinologist. So he's a pretty fascinating dude, and he's working specifically on metastatic stage 3 and stage 4 prostate cancer. So death, like essentially death sentence in men. And they have been giving men super saturation dosage of testosterone, apoptosis of the cancer cell.
Really?
Yeah.
Super
so it's
interesting.
insane, right? Like all of this research is starting to come out. So bottom line is that testosterone will not cause an otherwise healthy person, man, obviously, to have any form of prostate cancer. And their risk for prostate cancer is much greater if they're suffering from a testosterone deficiency. Now, let's just talk a little bit about that for a second right now, because obviously I've had 2 amazing days, talked to so many amazing people, which again, I'm very thankful and grateful for you to connect me to so many people. But the average guy walking around today, Ben, he doesn't know he has a testosterone deficiency. But you and I know that he's being bombarded from every singular angle, right? Like every biological process, the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, walking around, the blue light.
Yeah.
You'll see, like, I don't even have my glasses on, right? Like I was saying at the beginning of this podcast, I was like, oh shit, I left my glasses, right? But I mean, I'm very big on that. I'm always wearing my blockers. But it's a constant like war on our biological systems. And if you're not understanding that, then what are you doing, right? So it's like the most important thing for anybody who's watching this podcast, and I don't care if you're a bodybuilder, you're a spiritual person, or you're just somebody that just follows Ben, you absolutely should know if you have a testosterone deficiency. I don't care if
They
you're
follow
25.
me, chances are they're a bodybuilder and a spiritual
Most likely.
person.
But if you're true, if you're 25 or 50, it doesn't matter. You have to know what's going on inside your body. And again, it's so simple today, right, to get a blood test. Now, again, not to go too esoteric, I mean, obviously, when you get diagnosed with a deficiency, it's a symptomatic diagnosis over a lab measurement number, but you still have to have the lab measurement number to get a basis, right? Just to understand where you're at.
That's a perfect segue into the next question, lab values. So again, you said you're not particularly well-versed in the exact ranges, but when we look at, let's say a LabCorp printout or whatever the hell, Life Labs, whatever the hell we have, tell me about just the implications of the ranges that exist. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of interesting statistics around what's happened to the ranges in recent years and how those things are shifting. And so where should somebody aim to be? And is there an optimal place to hold your testosterone for function, brain function? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, great question. So in 2017 in July, LabCorp lowered the standard mean deviation for the top and the lower end of the range, right? So it used to be 3, and again, somebody can fact check me on this, but I think it was 336 or 335 to 1197. I know that was the end range. And then they lowered it to 240 or 250. I think it's 245 to 916. So essentially they flattened out, the bell curve. And if you listen to LabCorp, they will tell you that it was done because it reflects the population at large, which is mostly obese now, right? There's so many men suffering from insulin resistance, metabolic disorder, and obesity that, as you know, that lowers testosterone naturally. So they did that to flatten out the curve. But if you talk to very smart, enlightened people in the optimization space, they will actually tell you that the Endocrine Society, along with LabCorp, just made testosterone prescriptions more restrictive, right? Because now if you're a dude and you go into the doctor, again, hopefully you're not going into a doctor like I'm giving this conversation about, but you're going into an optimization doctor like you and I would work with. But if you go in and they test you and you're 1 point over the 245 range, which we already know that last year we classified you as 100, exactly, cannot get a prescription. So again, knowing that this is the industry or the world that we live in right now, which again, however you want to define it, it's anti-testosterone, anti-masculine, maybe both. You have to make sure that you're working with a physician and that you're, again, intelligent. You're musculoskeletally intelligent, as all of your readers are and followers and fans and listeners are. But the bottom line is you have to educate yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You literally have to go into your doctor's office today with an understanding of your symptoms. And what are symptoms,
and
right?
It's before you go into that, it's a hard thing because even I go into a doctor knowing more than the doctor, but I can't say that. Like, I can't go in and go, hey, man, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. right? Because I like my doctor. I want to keep my doctor. And I think a lot of people maybe live in that reality. Like, I can't go in and tell my doctor he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or like, even if I often bring him a resource and I'm like, hey man, check this out. Here's a study. I do this all the time with my doc.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we have a really great relationship. I'm like, hey man, check out this study. Here's this new peptide that came out. Here's this new hormone that came out. Here's this new application with testosterone and estrogen. I send him all that stuff and he loves it. But most doctors aren't probably like that, right? So how does somebody, I mean, you don't know the answer, but how do we start approaching like, hey man, my doc just isn't open-minded to what I actually should be doing, or he's going to prescribe me, I don't know, Clomid or something, or HCG instead of testosterone, or he's going to give me, God, who else knows what, right? He's going to give me AI. It's a tough relationship to try to hack because people are, one, afraid, and two, doctors sometimes aren't open-minded because of the ego.
Right, and it's a great question too. The lab coat God syndrome, thankfully, in my opinion, your generation, my generation, it's becoming more open-minded. I mean, my answer is always, look, find another doctor. Okay, if your doctor is you have a good relationship with your doctor, you have a good.
And how do we
okay,
do
so
that?
well, no, I mean, it's simple. So this is what I say. So again, depends on where you are in the world, but for North American purposes, and obviously Canada is a lot different than the United States because they're much more restricted in Canada with finding optimization doctors that know what the hell they're doing. But in the United States right now, like if you're going to a doctor through your insurance, right, whatever, HMO, PPO, whatever is, again, your work form of insurance, the likelihood you're going to get a doctor who knows what they're doing when it comes to testosterone optimization is like under 5%.
Right.
Okay. And going down that route, listening to this podcast, again, reading my book, being informed, you already know you're opening up a can of whoop ass on yourself, right? Because it's not going to go probably in the direction that you would like it to go. So I always say it like this. If you're going to choose, and hopefully you do, because as you and I know, testosterone, when done right, is a totally transformative, life-altering molecule. If you're going to do that route, you have to be prepared to spend X. And in my mind, and again, I steal this stepping on the shoulders of others, very smart doctors who say, depending on where you live in the United States, because obviously LA is going to be a little bit more expensive than Florida, New York's going to be more expensive than both of those places, it's going to cost you somewhere between $2,500 and $10,000 a year to become fully optimized. A $2,500 doctor, if you do the math on it, is like literally $150 a month.
$200 a month, yeah.
It's nothing, right? If you want one of the most amazing doctors in the world and you want to use peptides and you want to do other things and you want to do all the amazing, neuro and biohacking things that you have here, then yeah, you're probably going to be looking at $400 to $500 a month, right? But when you start breaking it down, it comes to sequential thinking and planning and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's not a lot. I mean, what's more important than this vessel, right? In this lifetime, in this incarnation?
People spend more than that at Starbucks or at a supplement shop, right? And,
exactly.
It's definitely.
So that's what you got to do, though. So, to answer your question, if your doctor, you have a great relationship with him, you say, hey, doc, man, look, this isn't your thing. I get it. Can you recommend me somebody before I go find somebody else? You just have that one-on-one.
Sure.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. Now, one thing we talked about yesterday that I think is interesting for you to talk about is how a certain number of things need to happen physiologically in order for your testosterone, even naturally, to be optimized, or for your body to actually benefit from exogenous testosterone. Sure.
Yeah. So the simplest thing is, if you're, again, watching this podcast, you've never done testosterone, you've never been on anabolic steroids, you never took anything. The four most obvious side effects, for sure, without a doubt, are a decrease in cognition. You have like brain fog, right? You're like, literally, it's the middle of the afternoon, it's 1 o'clock, and I don't mean you just ate a huge insulin bomb lunch. You just have no energy and no drive. You want to go home and take a nap, right? Like, that's a number one symptom / side effect of a testosterone deficiency is brain fog. Then the other ones are a little bit more known. Obviously, you have lack of energy, indecisiveness, kind of listlessness. A lot of guys get depressed, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a huge effect for guys in their mid-30s and even younger now. That's the sad part, man. Again, we're in such a toxic environment today. You have so many younger men now presenting with symptoms of testosterone deficiency, and a lot of doctors are afraid, who do this right, like to script a guy, even a testosterone increasing drug like HCG or clomiphene when they're 25 or 26, but a lot of guys need it. So it's just, again, we're just in such a toxic environment today. But if you have any of those symptoms or side effects, and then obviously there's sexual dysfunction. Sexual dysfunction for testosterone deficiency is literally at the bottom of the scale, though. Most guys think it's at the top, I can't get an erection or whatever. That's usually a sign of endothelial dysfunction. Again, inflammation, too much fat, shitty lifestyle. Alcohol, as you know,
kills everything.
Jesus, right. I always just say it's the number one consciousness suppressor in the history of humanity. But the bottom line is that you have to be able to identify these symptoms and then get tested. And by the way, so we should mention this, and now it's in Canada now too. There's some, as you know, there's tons of independent labs. You don't need a doctor's confirmation or prescription or any of that to get your lab work done, right? You can go to discounted labs, private MD labs, direct labs. I think you mentioned another company. There's so many of them. And for $50, get your total testosterone, your free testosterone, and your sensitive estradiol pulled, and to have an understanding of like where you're at. And those are the three things really, again, when you go down this therapeutic realm, that you really need to know as far as from an introductory standpoint of like whether you're ready to go down that path, right? Because obviously you need to evaluate other biomarkers. And of course, in the book, we give you a cheat sheet, and we spent 3 chapters talking about all the biomarkers. Because as you know, as you age, your biomarkers are going to change, right? So the importance of measuring your biomarkers from X to Y to Z over time in stages is critically important.
So one thing we talked about yesterday, and this is kind of the question, but I didn't phrase it correctly, was what are the things that I need to be doing just to optimize testosterone without taking testosterone? So
natural optimization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great question. First, number one, we've already hit it, do not be fat. Because being fat, inflammation, that's going to lower your testosterone. It's going to lower your free testosterone. It's going to increase your sex hormone binding globulin. It's going to cause all kinds of other inflammatory effects in your body. So do not be fat, right? So we don't have to talk about that because you've talked about that with people smarter than me a million times. Reduce your insulin signal. Hire Ben Pakulski to train you, and you better have a lot of money because he doesn't let people from the general public train him. But bottom line is, again, it's simple, right? Like focus on losing your body fat. As you know, Anthony J has a bunch of strategies in his book in Estrogeneration, but try to avoid EDCs. Again, try. Nobody's going to try to avoid EDCs. You just have to live a clean lifestyle, right? You have to avoid blue light exposure. You cannot be living around cell towers. You should not be having your cell phones or charging stations or any of those things like in your place of sleep. Clearly your nutrition is huge, right? You should be eating a clean diet. You should be, again, minimizing your insulin signal, getting enough protein, getting enough healthy essential fatty acids. You should absolutely positively be lifting weights, training, doing cardiovascular exercise. I'm kind of against, I'm obviously pro, and I don't say this as a shill because obviously I'm pro testosterone therapeutic, but I'm starting to go away of the natural optimization route as being so influential anymore because, again, of the war on our biological systems. It's so hard, right? So it's like a lot of people when they come to me, it's like, well, what's the easiest route for me to optimize myself, assuming I'm doing everything else, meaning I'm living a dialed-in life. I'm saying you got to get your blood work evaluated. I personally think, and again, it's just my opinion, I think you have to have above average genetics in this day and age, if you're over the age of 30, to have an optimal range. And you did ask me that question, so I'll give it. If you were going to measure your blood and you're not on testosterone, you're not on steroids, you're not on anything that's fake. By the way, we didn't even talk about that, but almost all testosterone boosting supplements are a scam, right? Like there's some stuff that increase libido, ashwagandha, maybe Tonkat Ali, some other stuff out there, adaptogens and stuff. But there's nothing that you're going to be able to buy at GNC that's going to truly increase your testosterone more than transiently, right?
Right. Short of like your basic, minerals like magnesium and B vitamins.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
What you should already have if you're eating right and doing all those things, right? But so many people, and they come at you, and we constantly see people like celebrities or Nugenics, Frank Thomas. It just, I get that so much, but but realistically, you have to, as a young man growing up today, be aware of all those things. But your range would be, if you were, again, above average genetics and you're over 30 and you're doing everything right, it would be somewhere between 650 to 900 natural levels. Again, that's total testosterone. That's not free testosterone. Free testosterone would be somewhere in 15 to 20, 17 to 25. Because as soon as you get over 30 with free testosterone, it's usually enhanced. And I don't mean enhanced, but therapeutic using exogenous use. So that's kind of like, again, the measurement, if I'm giving measurement numbers, but ultimately it still always comes back to like, do you feel good? Do you have good energy? Because if you do feel good and you have good energy and you're a beast in the gym and you've got above average genetics, do you really need to actually go get your lab measurements done? Probably not. But again, how small of a percentage of the population is that?
Right. One interesting stat that, again, I don't know if you know the details on this, but one of the doctors at Swiss mentioned that it was either 1985 or 1995 that the high end of the range was 1500.
Right.
And it keeps
it
trending
was
down.
Eric. It was Serrano. Yeah. So we can talk about that. And that's like literally the first 2 chapters of my book. basically 65, 70 years ago, the World War II and Korean War generation had 3 times the natural levels of the average guy walking around the street today. And again, it's simple to track that, right? Like those guys were living in agrarian communities. They did not have blue light or white light and all the sensitivities that we have. They did not have cell signals and cell towers and all these other things. Because again, all this electromagnetic frequency causes disruption in the endocrine system.
Maybe it's population control we don't even know about.
Do you want us to talk about that? I mean, I absolutely, I absolutely positively, we're not going down that path, but I mean, I absolutely positively believe, and I was talking to Kurt earlier today, and there's a guy who can back stuff up, is that there is something going on to either entrain us or reduce us. So, whether you want to debate that depending on your beliefs.
Estrogen or EMF, and yeah, for sure, man.
Right.
For sure.
Yep.
But it does make sense that we keep knocking down the testosterone levels, and they don't want to give people testosterone because then maybe that's going to make them more prone to...
Dude, the Hebrew University study, which again is in my book, this is scientific, validated, 30-year study, 48,000 people in the cohort population group, all 7 continents. They predict by year 2045. Well, they actually give a sliding scale. Between 2045 and 2050, men will be infertile, not be able to propagate.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
What other points have we not touched on that you think is vital for men to know about testosterone utilization? Yeah,
it's a good question. Personally, I feel that there should not be a stigma. Okay, you should not be fearful of your wife's, repudiation from your wife, from your, friends, from your boss, from your employee, anyone in today's day and age. You should not be afraid. You should not be humiliated. You should not have shame to seek this out as a form of therapy, right? Like there's nothing wrong to utilizing therapeutic testosterone. It's perfectly legal.
Right.
What kind of pushback are you going to get from society is a choice that you're going to, allow.
Right. So someone's sitting home right now at 20 to 25% body fat. Go to the doctor first, then get the body fat off, or get the body fat off, then go to the doctor?
I mean, that's a great question, man. You're good at this, bro. Get the body fat off. And if you don't know how to get the body fat off, hire somebody, right? Because that, again, is the number one, as they say, all costs, increasing morbidity or increasing all causes mortality is body fat.
Yeah. Do you think that testosterone will help them get the body fat off?
So that's the chicken and egg question. So testosterone is lipolytic, right? So we know that it does increase basal metabolic rate. It will increase thyroid or upregulate thyroid. There's a lot of things that testosterone does. And by the way, and we didn't even talk about testosterone and thyroid together.
I was going to ask that next.
Okay, good. But yeah, so the question, this is my opinion again, but I believe that if a man is committed to losing body fat, meaning he will do what's necessary from a dialed-in perspective, then yeah, sure. Seek out a doctor and say, Doc, I know that testosterone is lipolytic. I know it causes fat burning or improves fat burning. How can we design a program? Again, you're being nice to the doctor. You're saying, I'm going to support you, where you can start me on this, but then I can dial in my lifestyle further so that I can, get the maximum benefits from this.
Testosterone and thyroid. So we talked about this yesterday.
Yes.
There's like a certain sequence of things almost that needs to happen before your body naturally can actually produce testosterone. I teach this to my coaches. Is like everyone's chasing this number with testosterone and estrogen optimization, but if you back up one step, well, now you have thyroid optimization, which has to precede hormone optimization, testosterone optimization. Before that, you have to look at your HPA axis, right? You have to look at stress.
Yes.
So talk about those things and how they kind of all interrelate and affect each other.
So critically important. The best doctors will tell you that you cannot optimize testosterone without optimizing thyroid and vice versa, right? And there's also even really great doctors out there who can take a person who has poor lifestyle habits, as sleep, right? Let's talk a little bit about sleep. Sleep degradation or deprivation in today's society is probably the biggest systemic influencer of inflammation.
Yeah.
I mean, even more than body fat, and and again, visceral fat. I always like to quantify visceral fat and body fat, right? Because even a lot of bodybuilders are heavily muscle guys, and they look lean, but they have a lot of intramuscular fat, right? And that's the visceral body fat that's so much dangerous and causes the inflammation.
Yep. Talk about that. So I've actually heard some interesting theories, and I don't know if this is fact, that being on testosterone can actually inhibit the ability to lose visceral fat.
So it's not so. It's a good question or a good statement. It's actually it's the use of an AI that inhibits the loss of visceral fat, because that's one of the big issues of Aromatase or Aromazen, is that, competition bodybuilders, performance athletes, even strength guys, when they're trying to, it came up again, I've used it twice now on this podcast, when they're attempting to, prepare, get stage ready, whatever, meet ready, they're using a higher dose of an AI because in some crazy, bizarre fashion, they believe they need to block more of their estrogen as they're, cutting and maybe, even decreasing their testosterone again, because there's this perception, and again, it's a total misperception that you have to push estrogen down as you reduce body fat. It's the complete opposite. And all the studies, and again, I'll push to Dr. Neal Rouzier, who's also going to be at that same conference doing a study.
He's brilliant.
Brilliant, right? But he's doing a presentation on the idea that estrogen dominance is the cause of all of these side effects and symptoms, when in fact, again, it's the insulin resistance and the too high of visceral
Neal
body
Rouzier
fat.
presenting on the fact that he thinks that estrogen...
You should probably actually come down there for this, dude, because I'm telling you, there's 3 presentations that are all world-class.
So let me get that straight. He says that estrogen dominance is the cause of increased body fat?
So estrogen dominance is a myth in that it's actually insulin resistance and high visceral body fat that causes the high estrogen, quote-unquote, estrogen dominance, right?
Understood.
But everybody believes that. So it is the opposite, because again, he's given me all the studies, and I have all the studies, and it's incredible to see how many people have extrapolated. Again, the whole correlation does not equal causation stuff.
Sure. When we were at Swiss, Dr. Keith said something in passing, and I don't know how much you know about this or what you know about the data, but he said that having high estrogen has actually been associated with the ability to lose abdominal body fat.
Yes, it's absolutely the truth. And that's why, Keith doesn't even, Dr. Keith Nichols, happy to mention him. What's up, Keith? Amazing doctor. He's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is also trained under Neal Rouzier, but the research shows that, again, you need a healthy amount of estrogen from that aromatization pathway to reduce visceral body fat. And so that's why, again, I go back to the 70s and 80s bodybuilders who never used AIs. Mm-hmm. Look how peeled those guys got, right? Like, look at the conditioning level of those guys. The stress level was different.
So I talk about this all the time, right? Too. They weren't exposed to cell phones, blue light. TV was minimal. What were they doing in their spare time? They're going to the beach.
Exactly.
Like they were going for a walk. They're chilling out. It's just a different environment, a different lifestyle. That's why I believe those physiques are very different.
I agree. I just think that the only other adjunct into that, you're 100% accurate, is that a lot of guys are using super high levels of AIs. And those AIs are just, you get to a certain level and that's it. It just shuts it down.
So again, I'll share my experience. Sure. The one thing I did notice from AIs is, like, if I use it for the last 4 weeks, it did bring in my lower body, like bring into my condition. I was known for having that great condition, and it did help to bring in the lower body. But I also accepted the reality, like, you're gonna go all right, I'm going to feel like shit. Like, you're going to feel really bad. So unless there's, and again, did I need it was always the question. Like, if I just kept pushing harder on the cardio and pushing harder on the diet and on the training, did I need it? I don't know, but that's what I did. Is it possible, though, that you were using some other partitioning agent that may have increased visceral body fat deposition at the same time? I mean, anything. I don't know. I don't know what you were using. What would increase?
I don't know enough about anabolics, but like a trenbolone or a Winstrol or something like that?
Maybe, but I'm so specific to my lower body, not visceral fat, right?
Yeah, but I mean, when you say lower body, like in the quad trunk region?
Glutes, yeah.
Okay, so in the glute ham tie-in there is where you hold fat?
Well, not necessarily. Like, I'm actually usually pretty lean in my lower half.
That's what I was saying. I never saw you belly fat.
Well, that's exactly it, right? So, like, I was kind of known for always having the striated glutes, and the AIs were a part of that. And
what was your dosage of your AI?
Usually just a milligram of Aromatase, maybe 12, maybe 2 milligrams.
And that was every other day?
Daily.
Okay.
But I could feel like shit.
And
like I was aware of it, but being ignorant at the time, I didn't know that there was another option, right? I was like, that's what you do.
But see, I don't think you were ignorant, because I want to address this. I'm so glad you brought this up. I think that at a bodybuilder's super physiological levels, and I don't care what the dosage is, I think it's almost necessary to not have all of the quote unquote water retention and the other things. But you're right. I mean, what it also causes, which you suffer from, is horrific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt there's decreased water retention. And psychologically, I think that plays a big role, right?
Course.
So I would notice that for sure. I would lose pounds of water.
And a lot of guys say that in the therapeutic levels. Oh, I'm on 0.25 twice a week. And if I don't, because their diet sucks, right?
Yeah, or genetics, right? Like, some people are more prone to inflammation than others.
Absolutely.
So that's a big thing. And man, that's just that's the luck of the draw, man. Like I just happen to be someone who holds more water, and Steve Kukla and I used to joke about it, right? He's a professional bodybuilder.
Sure,
and
I know he is.
we used to joke about like him and I are the water buffaloes, but when we pull the water out, it's like, wow, it's crazy, but you just hold a lot of water. That's just genetic.
Yeah.
So it's a reality, but that's what we had to accept.
I wish that we could, and maybe that's where we're going with this. We could fund a study, over 6 months of a guy using, a microdose of an AI at a, similar 150 to 200 milligrams therapeutic dose of testosterone versus a guy not, and do all the things that you and I want to check for, and then, run it with a lesser dosage the next 6 months, right? So you go from like 0.25 to 0.0125 or something like that. And again, really track and assess all these different various cofactors and biomarkers to see. But again, all I can go by is the research, and I know for a fact that even using a microdose to block estrogen is causing harm to biological systems. And we should mention this because this is what's important, and this is what Dr. Komenarka is going to be talking about. And again, his lecture is titled The Dangers of Estrogen Inhibition in Men on Therapeutic Testosterone. Dude, he does DEXA scans of these guys, and he's like, you can't even imagine. It's like 85-year-old men.
Like with the visceral fat?
No, with their bone density.
Oh.
Their bone mineral density is shot to shit.
Really?
Yeah. So, and these are guys on microdoses for 5-10 years, he's got all these. He's going to be presenting these at this stuff. So it's going to be a real landmark, in my opinion, presentation. And he's a friend of mine and stuff like that, but he shared with me some of his research, and it's pretty incredible. So again, even though you might be, having symptom resolution from using the AI, it's still long-term not good for you.
Are there any natural supplements that are shown to help estrogen conversion?
So, DIM, calcium deglucarate.
Just for xenoestrogens, getting rid of them.
Yeah, I mean.
But not necessarily conversions?
Yeah, I mean, the reality, and there's a lot of guys that will debate this, but the reality is we already know we don't want to block estrogen, right? So if it's natural and you're using therapeutic levels, just not be fat.
Mm-hmm.
Live a non-inflammatory lifestyle, and we didn't even talk about that, but I mean, dude, you know this, and both of us we don't do this, but alcohol is a destroyer of worlds, right? Especially if you're trying to be optimized. I mean, you talk about creating, estrogen pockets or visceral body fat in the areas that you're not wanting to have it, which is obviously for dudes is like in the belly and in the hips and the lower butt and stuff like that. But it's like, that to me is like kerosene.
Yeah, no question, man. Yeah. It's definitely, I think everyone knows, but yet doesn't want to give it up. And it is what it is. But I would say of my demographic listening, it's probably like the people who drink once or twice a year. And But definitely not heavy. I'm guessing most of them aren't heavy drinkers.
So I did a podcast with James Swanwick recently, and he's the guy.
Yeah, I know James really well.
James is awesome, right? And he has that 60-day challenge. And he's told me, he's like, Jay, I have so many guys that once they do it, they never go back. He's like, it's mind-blowing. So I would just say, just to mention it, shout out to James.
Yeah, shout out to James. I'm wearing his glasses right now.
I know. I have them too. I have the exact same ones. 60 days, try it. And he's always like, try it for 30 days and see what happens. But if you go 60 days without drinking, he says that recidivism is like less than 1%.
Totally agree. And I feel the same about social media. Like, it's well,
not that going.
Yeah, not that it's going to affect estrogen, but
it might.
Yeah, exactly. But man, productivity when you stop that stuff
it's unbelievable, dude.
Unbelievable. And you're like, God, you don't realize. And I'm looking forward to reading that book that
shout
you
out to Cal
recommend.
Newport.
Cal Newport, man. Social Essentialism, I think it's called. That's definitely next on my list of essential books.
Dude, you and I, we're so like-minded. We got that Vulcan mind meld going on. But like, there's no doubt. Like, I live my life according to my calendar. And we can talk about this to end the podcast if you want. But like, if you're a man today and you're an entrepreneur and you're successful and progressive and you're dialed, you have to live your life with an avoidance of social media, right? Like I have twice a day that I check my social media. That's it. It's 30-minute windows, right? Like I'm lucky and fortunate and blessed enough now to have people helping me with my social media and stuff from that. But I'm like you. I still write my content. And I do that, but I do it in a way that you're right. Like, there's ways to block the noise, right? You can put the Facebook blocker. You can, there's other blockers for other various social medias. And again, the whole Cal Newport, social media minimalism approach is like, just have one social media that you're going to be influential on or that you're going to use. Stop trying to play a game where you're on everywhere. And if you are big enough, and you might be one of those people, have people doing it. Because you're right, it is such a distraction. And it takes us from our true purpose, which is, as you already very eloquently stated, to love, or to give love and to be loved. It does. It just distracts us.
Yeah, and you're right. I am producing my own content, and I for a long time I was producing but not posting my own stuff. So I noticed my productivity probably increased by 25 to 40%, just because like you don't realize those little micro interruptions, right? Like we're like, oh, I'm going to check this. Like even if it's like I stop at a light and I check and and that becomes a habit, and that becomes, I got to finish the loop of going back and chasing that and getting not to go down that path. But yeah, I am still producing my content, and I'm actually hiring some people now. Just hired some people for social, and looking always for great writers who love this content. So anyone who's listening, if you love writing content and you love my content, please reach out, and we'll definitely looking for people to write great content.
Awesome.
Anyone who's a great contribution.
One last thing I wanted to say that we didn't cover in testosterone was delivery systems, just real quick.
Yeah, that's a great. Thank you. And frequency of administration.
Let's talk about that. So it's a perfect way to segue and end this. And I'm going to piss off a lot of people. And I know you have a ton of doctors that watch this, but it doesn't matter. This is all about truth and transparency, the Jay Campbell and Ben Pakulski way. So there's only two right now. And again, everything can change. We're in the realm of the quantum, if you believe that all is possible. So the bottom line is that right now, the only two delivery systems that are foolproof, again, under the administration of a doctor who knows what they're doing and you as an informed patient, are injections and cream. And I have actually changed my stance on cream because of Dr. Keith Nichols and his brilliance. And again, he stole it from other people because the research has been out there, just no one interpreted it correctly. You can now use testosterone cream on your testicles. And the statistical, again, data proves that it has an 8 times better absorption rate right on the bottom of your scrotum than anywhere else on the body in human skin. So as I've been telling you about it, I switched from injections. I've been on, therapeutic testosterone injections for literally almost 17 years. About technically 8 months ago now, in the middle of the summer last year, I switched to the cream. I haven't injected myself since then. Absolutely amazing. Everybody's different, right? We're all biochemically unique, but Keith will say twice a day. So morning, take a shower, put it on your testicles or bottom of your scrotum. At night, do it again. Now for me, and you and I already talked about this, like I don't even do it twice a day, right? Like I feel amazing like this, even keel. Again, remember the twofold goal of optimization is happiness and balance. If I want to get frisky with my wife, we want to go away on a weekend, we want to go somewhere exotic and get crazy or whatever, then I'll put it on twice a day, right? And definitely enhances sexuality. I want to talk about cream though, because I get this question so many times. In comparison, I'll get to injections in a second too about frequency and all that stuff, but in comparison, the only thing you're going to notice if you're an actual optimized guy who's been on therapeutic testosterone a long time is that you'll notice that cream will give you better sexual function. And again, it's simple, right? It's an increase in DHT. It's right there, right on the scrotum. You get the DHT spike, the dihydrotestosterone is 8 times or 7 times more androgenic. And obviously and anabolic than the testosterone molecule itself. So you're going to feel an heightened sensitivity to sex. Does that make you like have raging boners and want to have sex with everybody? No, of course not. But if you're in a monogamous relationship, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are, it will definitely make you ready to roll a lot faster, So that,
what's
to
the
me,
dosage with that, Jay?
Great question. I was just going to say it. So it's a 200 milligram per gram. There's 2 forms of the cream. It's Versa Base and HRT. A lot of guys in the international community cannot get this, and that's a big problem. And if you're a guy who uses quote unquote transdermal, which again is on the skin, which is what we're talking about, it can't be the gel. You cannot put gel on your nuts. It will literally burn, and you'll be like, ah. And unfortunately, too many guys have gone down that path and learned the hard way. But the bottom line is that as more awareness of this delivery system, again, the 200 milligrams per gram cream, it's in a Versa base or HRT base. Almost every compounding pharmacy in the world knows it, and they make it. It's very simple. I could name them, shout outs to some of the guys, obviously, Empower Pharmacy in Houston, TaylorMade, obviously, in Lexington, Kentucky. There's others, Wells, there's a bunch of them. But at the end of the day, just make sure you're not putting gel on your nuts, and your doctor knows how to prescribe the right form. Again, 200 milligrams per gram. Injections. So in my book, when I wrote this, and again, obviously there's been 2 books. The first time we wrote the book, we knew that you needed to break the injection cycle up in a 7-day period into 2, right? And we do that because we know that the half-life of the molecule, regardless of the ester, and by the way, so many guys get confused on the esters. There's cypionate, there's anaphthate, there's propionate, and then of course in the European communities and international like Australia and stuff, there's sustanon, and then there's all these derivatives of sustanon. it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, testosterone is testosterone when it's broken down. However, the half-lives are a little different, right? Propionate is the quickest half-life. It's somewhere between, again, no one knows, but it's somewhere between 28 and 42 hours. Ananthate and cypionate are somewhere between 48 and 74 hours or 72 hours. So again, when you compare them side by side, they're still going to ultimately break down to the ultimate testosterone molecule in the bloodstream. So there's not that big of a variation depending on which one of those you're using. But this is what we know now that we aired in the first book, and we fixed this now. And it's even becoming more and more because more and more research is coming out. You need to inject a minimum, and again, this is testosterone optimization done right, every other day. Okay, why? And you know this, but because you want your body to feel or simulate the injection as endogenous release, the pulsatile diurnal release of testosterone. So optimally, daily injections are best, right? So a lot of guys now today are injecting, anywhere from 12 to 20 milligrams a day every single day. And some guys more, some guys are 25, 35 milligrams a day, whatever. Another question that I get asked all the time, and there's no real right or answer to this, and I've asked a lot of doctors to commit to this on me. A therapeutic level, in my opinion, is done over 250 milligrams every 7 days. Okay, so if you're on 300 milligrams a week of testosterone, I don't give a shit, right? But if your doctor was ever called out on the court and showing that he's giving you 300 milligrams a week, he probably could be in trouble. Again, there's no rule, there's no fast or hard data points, but when they look at blood levels,
in the case of if I've been doing 200 for a while, my levels are still low, let's go to 300.
Exactly, and I was going to there.
Sure.
And that's what Keith talks about, what's important, and this is why Keith loves the cream and, puts most of his patients on cream. He'll do injections, and he's great with daily injections too, but again, remember we were talking about there's no level. So let's say you go on the cream twice a day and they test you might be at 3,500 testosterone. The average doctor who doesn't know what they're doing, you gotta cut your dose, oh my God. Or sometimes they'll fire you, they'll freak out. And again, the doctors are afraid of being sued and they don't wanna be called up on the state medical licensing boards or any of that stuff because, they see somebody with a super aberrant, super physiological range. But the smart doctors like Keith, and there's many other ones now, they'll see that and they'll be like, okay, what do you feel good? I feel great, doc. Okay. Well, then you're a hyper excreter, or you just are one of those guys that shows a high spike variance. If we tested you again 36 hours from now, you'd probably be at 700. Right. So again, it's such a nuanced world in this industry, doing this right now, that you really have to be with a prescriber / provider who understands that. And I swear to God, Ben, and you already know this, and you probably got 50 guys in this gym right now that suffer this. You go to a clinic, they test your blood. They do it probably too quick or even sometimes too soon. Some guys crash the testosterone and the level is so aberrant, then the doctor freaks out. He cuts your dosage in half and he increases the dosage of your AI. Because most guys are on AIs, unfortunately. We're not there. We haven't enlightened everybody yet. And then it starts that whole vicious cycle.
One final question. How do you feel about HCG?
Good question. This is a difficult question. I've done some videos on this recently, and I've actually had the world's top androgen researcher is a close personal friend of mine. His name's Dr. Scott Howell. I should connect you with him. He's brilliant. He believes that HCG is completely useless. Now, when I say that, the caveat is, and I know you're probably on the same path, this is where we're going with this. If you're a man who's, I guess actually I should say if you're a man or a woman undergoing a sex change nowadays, right? If you want to have children, then HCG or HMG, and by the way, HCG stands for human chorionic gonadotropin, and HMG is human menopausal gonadotropin. Again, they're fertility drugs. They actually come from women's urine. You need those drugs to stimulate luteinizing hormone, which ultimately will allow you to maintain sperm motility and retain fertility. So you need that, concomitantly with testosterone if you do want to desire to have children and to maintain your ability to have children. Now, it's debatable, and you might even have a lot to say on this to finish this. It's debatable if a man doesn't use HCG and goes on testosterone for 15 years, because he's on, he's a world-class bodybuilder or whatever, and he's on super physiological levels, and then he wants to get off completely, go cold turkey and have kids. If he restarts, a restart protocol with HMG, HCG, and goes off testosterone for a couple months, that he could have children. As you and I both know, there's tons of guys that have done that and have had babies, right? So I personally am not, as an 18-year, almost 19-year now user of therapeutic testosterone, I think that HCG is completely worthless. Okay, and again, I'm past my fertility stages. I used it when I had my two daughters. So, and again, The reasoning is simple. We talked about it already. Testosterone in isolation to understand what is doing what inside your endocrine system, and then also to control for any kind of, aberrant patterns or perturbations that happen, right? So it's like when you have a doctor who immediately wants to put you on some cookie cutter templatized version of TRT, TOT, whatever you want to call it, you got to say back to him, dude, why are you doing this to me? How are you going to know what's going to do what? How are you going to know this? How do you know? Again, I know this is advanced and this is sophisticated, but this is the truth. So it's like, I always say it, find a better doctor, or at least have that intelligent conversation with them. Now, there are doctors out there, Dr. Jim Meehan is one of the guys in Midwest, and he's a very close personal friend of mine. He's on my round table, and he's a huge proponent of HCG, and he can give you 40 paragraphs on all the biological reasons why you should stimulate your luteinizing hormone receptors in your body while you're on concomitantly testosterone and blah, blah, blah. But again, correlation does not equal causation. As a 19-year experienced testosterone user, I have never felt HCG additionally does anything for me but give me oral acne and cause imbalance. Again, because it's another signal spike of estrogen and testosterone. And if you're already controlled and you're dialed in with testosterone, why would you want to add something that's going to do the same thing?
Got it. Jay Campbell, thank you, man. I appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you, Ben. It's an honor to be here, man.
Appreciate you being here, man.
Awesome.
All right, ladies and gents, that's a wrap with Jay Campbell. Hope you guys enjoyed my conversation. We recorded this one live in the gym, in the studio in Tampa, Florida. Jay dispels a lot of myths, and hopefully you guys got a little bit of information around this. And as I said, don't take what he says as face value. Go talk to your physicians or do your own research, right? This is just the means of initiating a new conversation. I love to bring on people who are challenging your paradigm, who are challenging my paradigm, challenging my beliefs, because that's the one thing that's going to allow us to start exploring new avenues and making new discoveries. And that's why Jay Campbell is on this podcast. Thank you very much to Jay for being part of it. Check out his book, TRT Revolution, and his website. You can head over to Facebook and find him also, TRT Revolution. Jay's in there every day, engaging, answering questions about testosterone replacement, about anti-estrogens, about HCG. And as you hear, he's not a big fan of anti-estrogens. And to be honest, either am I, which I may have mentioned in the podcast. It's definitely something that you want to consider if you are taking testosterone. Consider talking to your doctor about getting off of your anti-estrogens. Most people have high estrogen not because they're taking testosterone, but because they're fat or because they're toxic. So address those things first, and all of a sudden, estrogen levels cure themselves up. Guys, have an amazing day. And if you enjoyed the podcast, share it with one person who wants to live their greatest life in a body they love. And as always, head over to iTunes now and subscribe. What are you doing? Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pekulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.